For the past several decades, the prevalence of both allergies and atopic diseases have been on the rise. Food allergies, especially, have been getting more and more common. Why? Well, there are a lot of theories. A relatively new one has to do with the microbiome. A new paper published in JAMA Pediatrics gets into the weeds. Hopefully not the ragweeds, am I right? This is Healthcare Triage News. What's the microbiome? It's all the parts of you that aren't you. I'm talking about the very tiny bacteria, fungi, and archaea that live in us. Although they're small individually, altogether they're not. It's thought today that every person has as many independent microbial cells living in them as human cells, and we've talked about this before on Healthcare Triage. The microbiome, as it's collectively called, performs a number of useful functions. It can help with digestion, vitamin synthesis, and even immunological responses. That's where allergies come in. It's possible that medications that affect the microbiome might affect whether or not we have allergies. Acid-suppressing medications and antibiotics are two classes of drugs that could conceivably affect the microbes that live in our gut in unpredictable ways. It's also possible that acid suppression drugs might change the way in which we respond to orally ingested antigens. At least that's been seen in some animal studies. This study wanted to explore whether infants exposed to acid-suppressing medications or antibiotics in infancy were more likely to develop allergic diseases in childhood. The researchers used the TRICARE Management Activity MHS database, which contains data on healthcare utilization for U.S. uniformed service members and their dependents. A cohort was built of all kids born into the system between 2001 and 2013 and followed continuously for at least a year. The main exposure of interest was being prescribed an H2 antagonist, a proton pump inhibitor, or an antibiotic. The main outcomes of interest was a bunch of allergic diseases. And this is a big study. More than 790,000 children were in the cohort, and more than 60,000 of them, or 7.5% or so, received an H2 antagonist. More than 13,000 received a PPI, and more than 131,000, or almost 17%, received an antibiotic in the first 6 months of life. Many kids got more than one of these, of course. All right, of the 790,000 or so kids, about 24,000 developed a food allergy. Peanut was the most common, followed by cow's milk and egg. Much more common were allergic rhinitis and contact dermatitis and a host of other atopic disorders. Children prescribed antacids had an adjusted hazard ratio of more than 2 for food allergy and more than 1.4 for medication allergy, anaphylaxis, allergic rhinitis, and asthma. Children prescribed an antibiotic in the first 6 months of life had an adjusted hazard ratio of 2.09 for asthma, 1.75 for allergic rhinitis, 1.51 for anaphylaxis, and 1.42 for allergic conjunctivitis, and all of those were statistically significant. These results are somewhat in line with prior research, which has shown that early prescriptions for antibiotics are associated with an odds ratio of about 1.5 for developing an allergy. I don't want to minimize the strengths of this study. It's a huge cohort, and the analysis was well done. It does, however, have some limitations that certainly warrant consideration. Reverse causality could be one. Some of these drugs could have been prescribed because symptoms of allergies were mistreated with antacids or an antibiotic. There's also a limited number of covariates, and it's possible that something else unmeasured is the real predictor here, and it's associated with both increased drug use and increased rates of allergies. It's also possible that there's not causality here at all. Maybe kids who get prescribed drugs for some reason are also more likely to get allergies. In that case, it's a predictor, but it's not causal. But here's the thing. Why are we prescribing antacids for kids less than 6 months of age so commonly? Studies have shown that the risk of harm from a PPI might be higher than the chance of a benefit. We should always be avoiding antibiotic use unless it's absolutely necessary. It's very likely that these drugs are being overused in the very young. The tale of this study is that we should be even more thoughtful about using antacids or antibiotics in infants less than 6 months of age. I'm totally on board. But if for some reason your child needs to have one of these drugs for a real illness, it's not time to panic. This shouldn't be taken as evidence that you're consigning your child to a later allergy. And hey, if you like this, I'm doing a whole podcast doing audio summaries of articles like this once a week over at JAMA Pediatrics. Links are below. I won't cover all of those here at Healthcare Triage News, so you can keep up to date with them by subscribing to the podcast. Hey, did you enjoy this video? It really does help if you like or subscribe to the show right down there. And while we've got you, anything you can do to help support the show in other ways is appreciated as well. And one way to do that is patreon.com, a subscription service which allows you, the user, to support the show for as little as $1 a month. And if you don't want to, that's fine. It will always be free. But if you can, it helps make the show bigger and better. We'd really like to thank our research associates associates Joe Sevitz, Carlos Hiergos, and Crafty Geek, and as always, especially our Surgeon Admiral Sam. Go to patreon.com/healthcaretriage. Links also down below. And while we've got you, get any merch you like at hctmerch.com, and my book, The Bad Food Bible, still out there, still available in stores. Really appreciate it if you pick up a copy.